Right, okay, well, thank you, Mrs. Tamia. So at this point, we will move on to the next application on our list, which is in Bainbridge, the land to the rear of the Rose and Crown Hotel in Bainbridge. And if I could ask our planning officer, Mr. Paul Martinson, to introduce this application to us now, please. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen with you now. Okay, so this is an application for the erection of 5 affordable dwellings on land adjacent to the Rose and Crown at Bainbridge. The site is located to the north of the existing pub car park, and it's set back behind the recent development of Hornblower Court, which is here. The site is outside of the housing development boundary, and the development proposed is as an exception site for 100% affordable housing. The affordable housing that would be provided would be on a shared ownership basis. I'll just quickly summarise what this means, and I'll go over the assessment in the report. So people in housing need would be able to purchase a share of the housing of between 25% and 80%, which would be managed by a housing association. A minimum of 5% deposit would be possible on that mortgage. There would also be an annual maintenance fee of around £500 to cover general maintenance around the dwellings. An affordable rent would be paid on the remaining equity alongside the mortgage payments. Homeowners would be able to purchase more shares later as and when they could afford them. This is known as staircasing. I've included some example calculations in the report based on 40% and 25% ownership, which demonstrates that the houses are affordable to those on median incomes in the national park. The SHMA advises that those on median incomes cannot currently afford to buy on the open market, and therefore the proposed housing would provide a route to home ownership for those people whose needs are not met by the market. That's in line with the NPPF definition of affordable housing. The SHMA also advises that there is a need for this form of intermediate affordable housing. It includes a requirement of 10 units per year across the park. The proposed housing would help meet available sites within the housing development boundaries. The proposed housing would help meet the target of 10 dwellings per year. So the committee report demonstrates that there are no other suitable available sites within the housing development boundaries of service settlements in the Richmondshire part of the park. The proposed housing is therefore considered to accord with policy C2 of the local plan. The houses would be available to existing residents of Bainbridge Parish first, before being made available to the adjoining parishes and then the national park as a whole. In the event of one or more of the units not being purchased, they would be re-advertised for affordable rent, which would open up the availability of the housing to those on lower incomes. Members will have seen in the late comments that several of the objections have raised concerns that there is no demand for shared ownership, and that this is demonstrated by a lack of take-up at the Scott Hill site, which is also in Bainbridge. This site was approved back in 2008 and mainly consists of flats in a converted traditional building, and therefore cannot be directly comparable to the proposed modern family houses with gardens and parking. Nonetheless, of those 8 units that were approved, 5 are still occupied on a shared ownership basis, with 3 in affordable rented. This does not demonstrate a lack of need for this type of affordable housing. So this is the existing site plan. You can see the existing Hornblower Court development, which is coloured in here on the plan. The site is set further into the field than the existing development, and it adjoins the garden boundaries of these residential properties on Holmbrae Crescent, Adelborough Barn, the Coach House and Rook Hill. This plan shows the proposed site arrangement. You can see an area of hard standing providing parking and turning areas at the front of the site, with the dwellings set further back. The development would take the form of a pair of semi-detached dwellings here and a terrace of 3. There The rear gardens back onto the rising land to the north, with landscaping proposed along the site boundaries. So these are the elevations of plots 1 and 2. You can see the dwellings will be very similar in terms of appearance to the Hornblower Court development. This is the terrace of 3, which consists of plot 3, 4 and 5. Again, very similar to the Hornblower Court development, and would be made up of 2 2-bedroom and 1 3-bedroom house with a walkway through to the rear between 3 and 4. So this plan shows the appearance of the development as a whole, as viewed from the pub car park. This plan has been provided by the applicant's flood engineers to show the existing overland flows of surface water over the site in a flood event. One of the key concerns of local residents was that the development would lead to an increase in the displacement of water onto their rear gardens, which we understand happened in February last year. So this proposed plan shows how the overland flows would be affected by the construction of the dwellings. The plan demonstrates that the existing overland flow routes would be predominantly maintained, and through the provision of the attenuation measures such as the suds tank, the use of permeable paving, and the manipulation of site levels at the site and at the adjacent car park, the storage of surface water on the site would actually increase by a small amount. The proposal would therefore not lead to an increase in surface water flooding and would not increase the displacement of water onto neighbouring properties. There's been no objection from the lead local flood authority, who advises that the proposal would not lead to surface water flooding at this site or elsewhere. So onto the site photos. This would be the view of the site from the road past the Rose and Crown. This is the existing access into the pub car park that would become the main access into the site. The Highway Authority has objected to the application due to the substandard visibility at this access. However, this is an existing access that also serves traffic exiting the Hornblower Court development, and the addition of 5 extra dwellings is not considered to represent intensification to a level that would be significantly harmful to highway safety. You can see the edge of the site in this photo, which is delineated by this metal fence here. So this is a view from within the pub car park, looking across at the existing Hornblower Court development, with the application site on the far right edge of the photo, which is just here. This is a view of the whole site, as viewed across the car park. The site starts just before this metal fence here, and you can see the rising land beyond. So here we have a closer view of the edge of the site. You can see the gardens abutting the boundary here on the right hand side of the photo. This is a view further along the edge of the site. And this is the western edge. The dry stone wall would form the new boundary of the site. This photo is taken looking back towards the neighbouring properties that I mentioned. You can see that the trees growing along the boundary here with the dry stone wall. And then this is looking back at the Rose and Crown from the edge of the site. Finally, this is a photo of the flooding event that I mentioned earlier. You can see the water flowing along the lowest part of the site. As I said, the requirement of the NPPF and the policy in the local plan is to not make the existing situation any worse. So taking into account the attenuation measures proposed, along with the advice of the lead local flood authority, it is advised that the proposal would not lead to any additional displacement of water to neighbouring properties. In summary, the proposal would involve the development of a suitably located rural exception site for 100% affordable housing. The report demonstrates that the houses would be affordable and meet a clear identified need. The proposal would not increase flood risk and would not lead to an adverse effect on highway safety. The dwellings would meet accepted privacy requirements and would not have a harmful impact on residential amenity. Historic England raised objections to the proposal on the grounds of the harm to the setting of the listed building and the effect on the conservation area. It advised that the proposal would divorce the building from its farmland setting. As is argued in the committee report, this has already occurred through the provision of a large car park, and as you can see on the photo, the development is not likely to be prominent in views of the pub or in wider views of the conservation area. The rising land behind also screens the site in views from the north and east. It is noted that the Senior Historic Environment Officer raises no objections to the proposal. The application proposes to meet biodiversity enhancement measures through fixing of bird boxes in trees. However, as an update to the report, it is recommended that this requirement is instead met by providing swift nesting bricks into the fabric of the buildings. The application is therefore recommended for approval for the reasons set out in the report, subject to a legal agreement securing the affordable housing and the conditions referred to in the report, in addition to a further condition requiring the installation of the swift bricks in the external walls of the dwellings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. Now, we have no public speakers or statements on this application, so I can open the debate. And I think Mr. Kirkbride had his hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's sort of with sorrow that I'm going to actually go against this. I believe, along with the nearly whole of the village of Bainbridge, that this is the wrong development in the wrong place, and it is not affordable to the vast majority of local people. Basically, the site, Mr. Madison, very good. He did show the photo. Those that looked on the late comments saw photographs put in by local residents. This was the same site from a different angle, which shows that the whole field is likely to flood. I've known it all my life, and it's basically been a bog for most of the time. Horses go there. You can see that they leave the marks all the time, and this is really a very soft piece of land, and not really accessible for building these houses on. The access, as Mr. Madsen said, has not been approved by Highways. The previous one wasn't approved by Highways either, and this also should be taken into account. It showed the car park. Now, the car park there, it showed cars in the car park. They say there's 23 parking spaces. I think there's really struggle to get 23 parking spaces, but those vehicles that are using the car park are from Hornblower Court. The local people, because there's enough parking in the previous new houses, and they're having to park in the Rose and Crown car park, therefore making the parking for the hotel limited. Historic England again. It has said in the mention of the comments, the application fails to preserve and enhance the character or appearance of the conservation area. They don't like it. And one thing that's gone down really badly is the fact of the shared housing accommodation. They say it just will not work in a rural area. It is going to cost whoever takes more money, you know, and the earnings within the Upperdale are quite limited as to what people can earn and what they can actually afford to use to buy these properties. They say there is no alternative site. There is an alternative site, but it's down, according to the park, that it's in the flood area. It's in a lot less of a flood area than what this site is, where they propose to build these new houses. I do believe that this is the wrong scheme in the wrong place. The parish council originally, for the original applications, were in favour. Latest moments and movement. The parish council have now sent the letter in to say that they now are against this proposal. There's nobody in favour of this proposal except for the planning officers, and nobody else wants this particular scheme in this particular area, and we seem to believe that that there is another site where you could get some local approved housing on a better site. So therefore, I'm proud. I want to propose that these plans are turned down. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Kirkbride. Would anyone wish to second that?
I'll second Mr. Kirkbride. Mr. Amsden.
Okay, right. Thank you. Anyone else wish to contribute to this, contribute to the debate, or shall we perhaps move straight to the vote on this one?
Could I come in there, Madam Chair? I'd just like to say that the Drainage Authority haven't taken into account the amount of water that runs down from that hillside. They seem to take account into the water that does run off the land. It's only off the area that the housing's taking over that they seem to, and the drainage point hasn't been assessed to where it all goes to. I think the Cundiff that the water goes into hasn't been checked where the sud comes out of. So I'd like to see what the Yorkshire County Council has to say about that, because it's all right putting suds in, but you've got to get rid of it in a decent flow from the suds into the drainage system, and there hasn't been anything mentioned on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Amsden. Mr. Martinson, would you like to comment further on that specific point?
Well, all I would say is that there's an existing culvert on the site, which I think Mr. Amsden was referring to, and the suds tank would discharge at a low rate into that culvert. As far as I'm aware, the applicants aren't required to investigate the culvert beyond the application site. The point is that they have to make sure that the site is not going to increase flood risk at this site or elsewhere. The suds tank would discharge at a rate much less than the existing surface water runoff is likely to go into there, because it holds the water for so long. So my understanding is that and as the lead local flood authority has advised, that it wouldn't increase the rate of runoff from that site.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martinson.
Could I come back in there, please?
Yes, briefly, Mr. Amsden.
They will be responsible, you're responsible for allowing water to go into somewhere else's property. So they have the responsibility to make sure that the drainage system is perfectly all right from theirs to anybody else's.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Amsden. Now, I do have a number of other people wishing to speak now, so I will take you in turn as hands were raised. Miss Townley.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Amsden's right. Wrong on the last item. I'd just like to say that anyone on a lower tenement has to accept the fact that water flows downhill. It would be a neighbourly thing to do to make sure that it did so in a neat way, but they don't have any obligation to do so. I'd just like to point out to the committee that we seem to be at odds here. We want people to stay in the Dales. We complain that the developments that we've given permission for aren't built. And yet when someone puts something forward that the officers agree with certain considerations would be perfectly acceptable, we turn it down. So we're here to presumably support people in the Dales, support people coming to work and live in the Dales, or are we really here just to have a good look at these things and then turn them down? So basically, I would like to support the officer recommendation. I just do not think it is within our remit to start offering other sites other than looking at this particular application. That's all I really need to say.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Townley. Mr. Good, next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I'm against the application. It's very. I never thought I would be actually objecting to affordable homes, because nobody's more enthusiastic about them than I am and most of this committee, I'm sure. But we've got a situation where the parish council's against it, the ward members against it, the county council's against it, the Highways Authority don't think it's a suitable entrance. I know you can argue about entrances and sightlines and things, I appreciate that. But there's quite a lot of people against it. There is also the biggest concern appears to be that these are not viewed as affordable, as Mr. Kirkbride said earlier, don't appear to be affordable, and that they have, people in the village do say that there has been some difficulty in getting the shared ownerships that they've currently got to be fully occupied, and indeed, as we've heard, some of them are actually rented out. So it's very unusual for me to be against what is prescribed as affordable housing, but I just do not believe these are affordable. Therefore, I will be voting against the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Good. And finally, at least I think it's finally, Mr. Neil Heseltine.
The other Heseltine would like a word sometime. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It was just on that question of affordability. I'd just like to get a bit of clarity, if I could, please, from Mr. Martinson, and thanks for the presentation, Paul. Can I just ask you to expand on the affordability and the value of the housing and the mechanism of shared ownership, and just to ensure that I've got it right in my own mind? The way I see it is that is worth 280,000. A young person or persons are able to buy that house in the first instance, 25% of that house, for £70,000, and throughout their lifetime they can increase the share of that ownership. So in my mind, that would make these houses more affordable for young people. But not only that, it is more likely that these houses are going to be built because you've got a value of a house which gives the builders some profit on over what it costs to build them. So for me, it overcomes quite a lot of problems that we've encountered where we've given permission and the houses haven't been built because they haven't been able to be sold at a value that builders have made money out of. So therefore, they haven't been built. So for me, in a lot of ways, this solves quite a lot of those problems. So I just wanted to make sure that I was right on my thinking on that. That was all. Thank you.
Yeah, that's completely correct. That it can somebody who's buying a house for the first time can purchase 25%, and then they can, as I said in the presentation, they can staircase up in 10% blocks at whatever time they like, whenever it suits them, whenever they reach a point where they can afford to take on that additional mortgage. So the mortgage would be, as you said, sort of 70%. Well, obviously minus the deposit, but you could build up that, and you could stay in the properties, or you could use them as a stepping stone to purchasing on the open market. It's however it worked for the person who's going to occupy them.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, Mr. Martinson. Meanwhile, more hands raised. Miss Townley.
Sorry, Madam Chairman. I thought I'd proposed. Sorry, to support the officer's recommendation. I probably, in my fury, I probably hadn't made that clear. So I was probably waiting for a seconder.
Well, we had already. We first of all need to take a vote on the proposed refusal of the application proposed by Mr. Kirkbride and seconded by Mr. Amsden. So we're still on that debate, and so if that's okay, I will move to Mr. Monday now, who wishes to speak, and then I think we'll vote on this one.
Mr. Heseltine, Robert would still wish to speak.
Sorry. Mr. Heseltine, you go first. You were next in the list.
Thank you. Just to comment on the affordability argument. Yes, staircasing is attractive to some. 25% capital first part of the mortgage, staircase after that. But the balance, you don't get the balance free. The balance has to be reflected by rent. And So the affordability isn't just the lower mortgage. This application is not popular in the neighbourhood at all. The objections, public responses, 15 letters there, are very varied. I don't see any letters of support. But what really does concern me on this site is that this would be the second significant application around the back of that public house. And the Highway Authority has recommended refusal based on substandard visibility of the access on both occasions. And we're somewhat light-heartedly, I think, disregarding the professional advice of the safety aspects from the Highway Authority. So certainly with that background, I'm unable to support it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Heseltine. Mr. Monday.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In considering this application, there's a couple of wider issues I think we've got to bear in mind. The population of the national park is in decline and it's aging. We need at least 55 new dwellings a year to stop the decline. Last year, around about 22 were completed. We need more homes, no question. Secondly, we have a stated policy to promote the national park as a place to live for younger working-aged households. To help halt the decline in the numbers, we need more affordable family homes for local people. Now, argue as you wish about what affordability is, and I noticed that in the affordability argument, we've always chosen the most expensive of these houses. If they go to shared ownership, that is affordable. And if they don't go to shared ownership, they go to affordable rent. Whichever way we go, it will become affordable homes. There are 5 modern family homes here for local people, ideal for young working-age families. And it's a national government-backed scheme, primary, surprise, surprise, first-time buyers. Therefore, I will be supporting the officer's recommendations. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Monday. Mr. Kirkbride, I see you're wanting to come back in. Are you wanting to respond to comments on your proposal there? You're muted, Mr. Kirkbride. Can you switch your mic on, please?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, we're, as one said, we are all in favour of new local housing for local people, but we need them in the right places. It's all right, you wanting the National Park are wanting to get the figures up, and it's pointless getting the figures up if the houses that they wanted to build are in the wrong places, which these are. We do realise that we want new housing, and we're all, especially local, working for this and looking for proper sites where we can get these houses. This site is just not the right site for these particular houses. And the drain, it wasn't said, but that water, just not only in that field, but in the fields surrounded to the west, they're the similar, and the water's going to drain through. That water's not going to get drained away, no matter what they say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkbride. Now, before we go any further on this, I just wanted to turn to our legal advisor, Ms. Bevan, on this one. Can you summarise where you think we've got to on reasons for this, in support of this proposal, which would be contrary to officer advice? Can you comment for us, please, Ms. Bevan?
Yes, Chairman. I have the following reasons from the debate on primarily Mr. Kirkbride. Issues around flood risk, unsatisfactory highway access, harm to the conservation area, and the issue of affordability insofar as shared ownership is not considered by members to be affordable. All I would say on that last point is that the need and the calculation of affordability has gone through the SHMA process and is considered to be affordable housing, and it is considered to be a need for this kind of affordable housing in Bainbridge.
Okay, thank you. Right, so I think we will move to the vote on this one, and it will have to be a named vote because it's contrary to officer recommendation. So it has been proposed and seconded that this application be refused for the reasons that we just ran through. Can I hand over to you, Mrs. Tamia, to take the vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So if we could start, please, with Mr. Amsden. Are you for or against refusal?
For refusal.
Thank you. Mr. Foster?
I'm against the motion, so.
Yes, okay, so you're against refusal. Yeah, it's a double negative. I apologise, members, yeah. Mr. Freer, are you intending to cast a vote on this matter?
Yeah, no, I can't because I missed most of the debate, sorry.
Mr. Good? Mr. Good, are you still with us?
Sorry, my apologies. I forgot to mute myself. I support the motion before us.
Thank you. For refusal. Yep. Mr. Neil Heseltine, for or against refusal?
Against refusal.
Against. Mr. Robert Heseltine?
For refusal.
For refusal. Mrs. Hutton?
Against refusal.
Mr. Ireton?
Against refusal.
Mr. Kirkbride?
Refusal.
Can you just repeat that? Sorry, Mr. Kirkbride.
Yeah, for refusal.
Mrs. Lancaster?
For refusal.
Mrs. Martin?
Against refusal.
Mr. McPherson?
Against refusal.
Mr. Monday?
Against refusal.
Mr. Parsons?
Against refusal.
Mr. Swain?
Against refusal.
Miss Townley?
Against refusal.
There's 10 against refusal, Chair, and 5 in favour, so that motion doesn't go ahead, and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Tamia. So that motion has fallen. Would someone like to make a Miss Townley?
Yes, can I propose the officer's recommendation, please?
Anyone to second that?
I'll second that.
Okay. And unless anyone wishes to comment further, we'll go straight to the vote on that one, please. Mrs. Tamia.
So everyone in favour, if you could raise your electronic hands now, please. And I see the following hands raised: Mr. Foster, Mr. Monday, Swain, Mr. McPherson, Mr. Parsons, Miss Townley, Mrs. Hutton, Mr. Neil Heseltine, Mr. David Ireton.
Sorry, did I raise my hand or not? I don't think I did. I meant to.
No. Yeah, thank you. And yourself, Mrs. Martin. If anyone is against that proposal, please could you raise your electronic hands now? So I see the following hands raised: Mr. Amsden, Mrs. Lancaster, Mr. Good, Mr. Kirkbride. Wish to abstain? There's no hand. Freer. And then Mr. Robert Heseltine on the telephone. Your vote, please. Mr. Robert Heseltine?
I still am against the application on highway grounds.
Thank you. So that vote is carried, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that application is approved in line with officer recommendation. Thank you very much, everybody.